All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast. It's great to see you this week. I want to remind everyone, please subscribe to the show and follow us. Leave a review on Apple. It's real easy. Basically, go to the podcast page, scroll all the way down till you start to see the starred reviews. Once you see that, on the left-hand side, there'll be a button for you to click and leave your own written review. If you can leave us a 5-star review, if you love the show, that really helps us out in getting our rankings up high on the show. Big help for me. The other one is go check us out on the website, www.ffipodcast.com. Our blog there is growing day to day. I've got all kinds of great articles that I'm writing. I come up with ideas all the time. And if you have an idea for an article or a show, please continue to submit those to the Fly Fishing Insider. There's a contact page on the website, or just send it to Christian at flyfishinginsiderpodcast.com. So really appreciate that. On today's show, I've got Dominic Petruzzi on the line. Dominic is from Pennsylvania, Central PA. I'm a PA guy myself, originally from Pittsburgh. Every once in a while, you guys see me wearing my Stellars hat. Voting for the Stillers, yeah, man, Dominic, it's really good to have you on the show. I'm excited about this because you're going to talk a little bit about, hey, some of the ways that the fishing for predator fish in particular has changed in Pennsylvania, which is great. Because I kind of participated in that when I was younger. And then after that, we're going to go into predator fly fishing fly design and the importance of the different elements of that. And I think that's really cool because a lot of people are now starting to experiment like, hey, there's not just trout fishing for fly fishing. There's like all this other stuff. And they're realizing like, oh, well, if the river's crowded, I can go to like 30 different lakes and have all kinds of space and different things to go after. And there's nothing like catching a big old musky dragon on the fly. I mean, I think for me, seeing those things turn is like in the white belly and the just initial run and tear off is like absolutely incredible. And then of course, when you get that duck bill by your boat and you're either, gill grabbing it or you're netting it, it's a pretty rad thing. So I'm excited about this one. Last wrap up of the show before I get back to you, Dominic, is we're going to talk about a tip, and that's your fly tying tip and how to maintain thread tension and thread control and the importance of that and why. And that's a big one because I used to tie flies quite a bit. My eyes are pretty bad now. I don't do it as much, but I was a counter, man. I counted every turn and I was like you, super short in my thread length. So I had good control and then always holding tension, always holding tension. So excited to talk about that one. Well, let's get this thing rolling. Dominic, cool. You're at Streamer King Flies. That's right. Streamer King Flies on Instagram, if you guys want to follow him. And it's streamer.kingflies.ecwid.com. That's streamer.kingflies.ecwid.com. And we should be set there. So, Dominic, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you, and you can fire up on your Pennsylvania fly fishing.
Yeah, so we have lots of water in Pennsylvania that it's not only for trout, but it's coming into muskie now. Nittany Valley Muskie Alliance has done a really great job over the past 10 years in bringing the stocking program up to what they're calling a fishable level. Glendale's probably one of the best lakes now for fishing muskies. Tionesta's a great lake to get out there. They've been doing the Beast of the East muskie tournament for the past, I think 10 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That gets right around, I'd say 80 to 90 contestants coming in every year to fish that tournament along the Allegheny River, from the dam all the way down to Buckaloons. It includes Tionesta. There are many other lakes out there, including Cowanesque, that also has the Pure and the Tigers, plus the state stocking the Tigers. Plus, there's lots of other moving water out there that the state stocks. So there's lots of opportunities out there for muskie.
Yeah, quite a few. That's pretty awesome to hear because I mean, I haven't followed it in years, and Pennsylvania was a very well-known muskie fishery, a long time ago, way, way into my youth, and even before that. And then it kind of fell off the map for a bit. I think there was maybe some overfishing, there wasn't the best management, et cetera. But it sounds like around the 10-year ago mark, uh, were they starting to integrate like planting fingerlings and things like that? How are they bringing those fisheries back? Are you aware of that?
Um, there was the advanced, I want to say the advanced fingerling program, to where they, instead of the 12-inch, they actually were stocking 15-inch size
Mm,
muskie in some of the lakes. I believe they were not just the fish from the New York, but they were actually bringing some in from Wisconsin, just because
mm,
they would do a little bit better in some of our lakes. Some of our lakes had that skunk cabbage that they were looking for,
yeah,
so that they would incorporate a little bit better. I believe one of the state Pennsylvania Muskie magazines put out, was trying to be known as Muscovania, as well. Had a real good article in that as well. So
that's
they've been
cool.
doing a really good job over the past, I'd say, like I said, about 7 or 8 years, really kind of ramping that up as
Yeah.
not just known for the trout, but also doing some alternative species as well.
Yeah, and you had mentioned too there are some hybrids like tiger muskie and things like that. I mean, even though they're benign from a reproduction standpoint, their growth expectation over like a 6-year period is astronomical. I mean,
Absolutely,
being able to go
absolutely,
in at a 15-inch fish and come out as a 45 is totally within question.
correct.
Especially in fisheries like Pennsylvania, where the food sources are high with panfish and perch, things like that.
Panfish, and I believe also, especially lakes like Kawaneski, that gives your shad population is in there.
Mm,
So they're trying to keep that shad population down. Um, and it's just exciting to see some of those fish in there.
yeah,
It's really good, really
yeah,
good.
yeah. I mean, if I will stamp of approval if you haven't pulled out a 45-inch plus muskie or tiger muskie. I mean, hold on because it is a whirl of a time. I mean, you're first of all, usually when you hook those things, for me, it's always been in shallower water that I've had the highest appreciation because you're usually using something with a bucktail or some schlappen or whatever, and it's like strip, strip, strip. I like super high vis flies because I can see them and see the action. I'm real big on like as soon as your fly lands, and I was taught this years ago by a Wisconsin guy on gear, is as soon as your bait lands, it needs to be coming to the boat. It can't land and stop. It has to be moving. And I'll never forget fishing a shallow area where there was a spring and
Yeah,
the water was like crystal clear. And out of the weeds came a muskie. And I had said it before, it was like a dragon just slamming the fly. And that twisting and arching of the body and the first leap and then the run and then the like, oh Lord, hold on. And you're like on heavy line, you could just rip and really kind of manhandle with that fish and pray to God you get a good hook set into the boat because when they do bite, it's a hell of a ride, man.
it,
I'm
it,
so stoked. This is like it's my
it is.
hair
Yeah,
standing
oh
up
yeah.
talking about it.
It's a heck of a battle. It's a heck of a battle. It's almost like a wrestling match. So
Yeah.
it's fantastic. And the hybrids have a little bit of pike in them as well. So I mean that's why they're usually a little more aggressive. Is they got that pike in them. So it's fun. It really is fun. And you're 100% right. Usually you want to get it out there and get it back into you, and just keep casting
Right.
is the big thing.
Yeah.
Just keep at it.
And it's the standard stuff too. Your figure eights are huge. I mean, another story from that same guy is, we were fishing water and I had one follow. Came all the way back to the boat. Now we were fishing gears, fishing a bait caster, and I remember I had like some kind of I think it was like some kind of rooster tail or something on, bigger rooster tail type thing. And I did my standard figure eight and pulled out. And as I was pulling out, the fish came into view.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no. And I remember him, he was watching too, right? And he saw it and I saw it, and it was like that billionth of a second panic. And I just, for some reason, I did the right thing and I clicked my button and dropped the bait into the water. And as soon as that bait hit the water, that fish was already turned around. It turned back around, came right to the boat and smashed it. And it was like hook set right next to the boat. And I remember that ugly stick, like kind of, rod of his just arching over, and, the scrambling in the boat for the net, and, like, don't let that thing go anywhere.
Yeah.
And what a reward, man. Those fish are just so rewarding. I think it's how much work you put into it. And then they're beautiful fish.
They
right?
are. They
The
are.
mouths
They're absolutely
beautiful.
fish.
The shovel head is beautiful and different.
Yep.
And then the
redness of the
body,
fins, everything.
Fins. I mean, they're just the spectacular fish. So, I could go on for days and tell stories. I'm sure you can too, but let's get into it. So Pennsylvania's come around quite a bit. I'm really excited to hear that. Having been from Pennsylvania, you mentioned a few waters, but I think your specialty really is in moving water, if I recall you mentioning. So talk a little bit about the moving water availability, and then we'll jump into flies.
I really like the moving water. I mean, the lakes are nice, but being on a river and just being able to move down through a section of river is really nice. Being able to fish 4 or 5 miles, even 7 to 8 miles, is super nice. It keeps your mind active. It doesn't get you that boredom of, okay, when's that fish going to come out? You're always getting to see a different section of river, whether it be a rock eddy or a log jam, or there's another section of weeds that I haven't fished before. You're not seeing that same consistent weed line or something like that, especially if you're in a smaller boat. So you can use a drift or a pontoon boat or an inflatable to kind of work that system. And up where we're at, we're fishing the headwaters. So fishing in those headwater type of things even brings that intimacy in more. So now you're talking about getting a 42 to 45 inch fish in a waterway that's only 30-foot wide. So now you're really starting to bring that and condense that down into really intimate water. So when they do launch out and come out of a log jam, they are right there in front of you.
Wow, that is really intimate. I mean, that's a tiny little waterway.
That's right.
What do you normally fishing out of? Do you fish like a personal pontoon, or do you fish more out of a drift boat, or do you have like a John boat with a motor so you can go up and down?
It's either a drift boat or a 2 or 3 man cataract is kind of our favorite way to fish. I like the cataract just because I can put my feet down. So like, let's say we move a fish or something like that, I can just drop my feet down, kind of nice and stealthy, not always dropping the anchor down.
Right.
Especially if we get in those low water situations, I can just drop my feet down, be about waist high, and then allow the front or the back guy to work the fish. And do what they need to do to make the cast. You can't always do that in a larger water, but in that smaller water setting, you can kind of do that and allow the angler to play the fish, make a cast, and be a little more stealthy about it. Not that you have to be with a muskie, but sometimes it's nicer to do. And it makes it possible to not always need that figure eight. If you're stealthy, they don't know you're there, and sometimes they'll eat midway out from the boat.
I'm curious to hear that. That's a great kind of point that you mentioned in there of like retargeting the fish. Like, hey, I moved one. And you see that every once in a while with big fish and trout fishing. Not very often. Usually, if you've spooked them, their chances of coming back are pretty rare. But on a big predator fish like a muskie or a tiger muskie, they seem to be so aggressive that, man, if you move a fish, like, take the time to retarget, because they do eat yet again. And I'm curious, do you have any assumptions on like, hey, if I do that, 30% of the time I can get them to usually eat or whatever it is?
So I just try and keep that methodology of don't leave fish to find more fish kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more of how much time do I have in the day before I have to take out and it's too dark to take out.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's at the beginning of the float, I'm going to give that fish as much time as he needs and kind of play him out. I'm not going to sit on him for 2 hours, but at the same time, I'm not going to only give him 5 or 10 minutes.
Right. So do you
Uh,
rest them and
yep,
then that's a
yep, we'll
technique?
rest them. Yep, we'll rest them 5 or 10 minutes. We'll switch flies.
Okay.
We'll go smaller. Uh, we'll go smaller. We'll try some different colors. We'll try some different colors in that size range. And then we'll supersize them. So we'll go real big. We'll go 15, 16
Mm,
inches just to give that real large attention getter like,
yeah. Moving
hey, here we
water.
are.
Yeah, right, right. We're here, right.
Big protein size, because you never know what that fish is doing. It could be a big female that just came off spawn that is looking for that big protein meal to
Right.
replenish her reserves. And sometimes she's not looking for a little 7, 8 inch or 12-inch meal.
Yeah.
Sometimes she wants something large, again, to replenish that protein that she just lost.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Very cool.
so again, on the back end of that, sometimes it's a male, and sometimes he's only looking for a 7 to 8 inch fly. So you gotta kind of play that fish's personality. So, and sometimes after a half hour, you just got to make the decision to say, this
Not
fish isn't
today.
eating today,
Yeah.
and kind of move along.
You
So,
know, let me ask you this then. You move on, right?
yep.
Um, and I would say there's three ways to move on. One is we saw a fish, we didn't get it to re-eat. We lost a fish, we didn't get it to re-eat, and then we gained a fish.
The
When
way
I
I think
was
about it is we have a location. You have that fish's
Yes,
address.
that's
Yep.
exactly it. That was
Yep.
my next question.
Yep.
When I fished with my buddy, we fished more still water, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
know every time we moved a fish, every time we caught a fish, it was note taking. What depth were we in? What lure were we using? What was the weather like? And where were we at? And if we tracked those things, and I remember I went over his house one day. This guy was a maniac, and he had pin boards everywhere of maps of lakes, and there were pins everywhere. And then on each pin he had a little paper flag he made with a number, and then he would go back to those old Mead paperback uh, notebooks, the black and white ones. And dude,
Yep.
he would look up the number and he'd be like, "Oh, it was on this date at this time," and and like just rallied. I'd be like, "Well, this is crazy," and I didn't know anything about muskie fishing. We'd go out catch 6 or 7 fish in a day on the lake, and we'd always get back to we were in this little crappy little boat, and I thought, "Oh yeah, we're having fun fishing." I just didn't know, right? And then we'd get
Right.
back, and there'd be these guys in these like $150,000 bass boats, and they'd be like, we didn't get anything today. And we were like, what? You didn't get it? I was like
Yeah.
that. I think he knew better, but I didn't. I didn't know
Right.
this guy was like a freaking legend. And um, yeah, it was so cool because he was like this area, and we would get out into the boat. And I remember he would say, we're going to fish these 4 spots today. And he would have copies of those pages where he knew where eats were, and we would go fish those areas and retarget those areas as well. So
Yeah.
curious to hear what your concepts around that and how you kind of manage that if you do.
Yeah. Again, those are those fish's addresses. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Usually muskies are on their thrones, as they call them, or so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to leave their house. You know what I mean? They'll go eat, they'll move throughout a waterway or a system, but they're not going to go too far
Yeah.
unless it's a high water event or they're moving up through the system to spawn or something like that. But if it's normal fishing time or that kind of thing, they're gonna hold tight to either that that log jam or that rock pile or that big boulder, that's their home. That's
Okay.
their location. You know what I mean? They're the largest predator in the system. You know, they're the lion, they're the tiger.
Yeah.
They own that.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no other fish that's going to move them out of there. So that
Yeah.
is their house. So if you move them, that's where they're going to be. More than likely within, 10 to 20 feet. That's where they're going to be the next time you
Hmm.
go through there. So, especially in these smaller river systems or these smaller bodies of water, the next time you float, especially if you move one or if you lose one, that's where he's going to be at.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. They don't really come out of their prime lie, right? That's
Right.
it. And I think,
Yeah.
from what I've learned on those kind of fish is it's also dependent on the type of water you're in. So if you're in an area where you can look and see like, okay, there's a number of areas that look like they could be prime lies, they can move within those. But if you're in like a small creek or something and you're like, dude, there's not another prime lie around here for a long ways, they're not moving unless it's
No.
at night. That's
Right.
always been my
Yep.
perspective. So
Mm-hmm.
very cool. Very cool. Well, Dominic, let's do this. You love fishing for them, but you you have a partnership with Norvice in some shape, way, or form. You're an avid tyer, and you tie predator flies. So, what I'd love to
Yeah.
hear is your perspective on predator fly design. Like, what are the elements that you like to think about when you design a fly?
So I'm an ambassador for Norvice. They do lots of great things for me. Tim and Michelle are awesome as the owners of Tim and Michelle O'Neill are awesome as the owners of Norvice. I can't say enough great things about them. But when I think about tying predator flies, it's all about the movement and profile. Um, if I can get the profile and the shape of whether it be the fish or the bait fish I'm trying to imitate, I want to imitate that fish or the movement. Those two things are the most important to me.
Okay.
Um, Getting that movement and action in the fly is important, and then that head profile and things are also important. So movement in the back, head shape and profile in the front. So whether it be a sucker and it has a larger, bigger profile in the front, whether
Right.
you have that huge Bruford spun head profile in the front, uh, or maybe it has a higher profile midsection because we're talking about a perch or a bluegill, and you
Mm,
have to
yep.
maintain that flare a little bit more in the higher midsection. You're still going to want some wiggle and some back end movement. So you're still going to maybe use some shorter schlapping or maybe some longer schlapping. Or maybe I'm going to build a game changer style because I want that swim profile. If I'm doing, again, like your sucker or any type of bait fish, like a shad
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something like that. Always trying to think about those type of things. And anymore, a lot of the gear plays a part into my thinking as well. Gear is uh, such a good way to catch the fish. I try to think about that when I'm implementing that into my tying.
So
So one of
when
the
when you say gear, are you referring to the tackle itself?
Yep, yeah,
And
the tackle itself. So like one of the best gear baits would be like your blade baits, like that cowgirl.
yeah,
So like your double blade baits with like the big flash coming off the back. They're
yep,
like one of the best musky baits out there. So if I can design a fly or have a fly emulate
right.
that, which leads to a lot of that flash I put in the fly, generating a lot of that flash profile of like those two blades going
Yep, yep.
around and around and around,
How much
and
water
then
you're pushing.
pushing.
Yep. Okay.
And then maintain the profile of the fish I'm trying to emulate. I'm kind of winning both battles there. And that fish is going to see that coming through the water. And when he sees that coming through the water, whether it be a clear water or a tannic water situation, it's gonna start triggering on multiple levels. And when you can start trigger that fish on multiple levels, then you're starting to check off boxes. And me and my buddies talk, when you're starting to check off multiple boxes, now you're starting to put things more in your favor as an
Huh.
angler. And when you
Yeah.
can
Yeah. Yeah.
start putting more things in your favor, now you're talking about eats and not just
Yeah.
follows.
I
So,
love that. I love that concept of multiple boxes. Can you talk into that a little bit of like what the triggers are that you guys are, looking for?
so everybody talks about like your moon phases, your water quality, just different things like
Temperature.
that,
Yeah.
temperature, all that kind of stuff. So if we can get there and have a good moon phase, if we can get there and have good water quality, if it's clear water, that's good. If we can have instead of low water, a good
Right.
water, if it's not blown out, that kind of thing. If the water
Pre-spawn,
temperature is good,
post-spawn. Right.
right.
Yeah.
And now if the fly is working in our condition, now we have 5 boxes checked off. We have things going in our favor. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? To where
Yes.
if the moon's not working in our favor, if this isn't working in our favor, if this isn't working, you know what I'm saying? We have some of those other things that are working against
Yeah.
us instead of
Yeah.
working in our favor. So
You're
I
playing with
like to
house
try and
money, man. You're like stacking the odds. I love it. It's great.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
what we try
That's
to
awesome.
do is try and check as many boxes as we can, and then the fly is also the same way. If I can build a fly that is going to check off those boxes, it has movement, it has shape, it has profile, it's pushing water, and it's light and easy to
Silhouette,
cast,
light. Yep. Okay.
then there we go. A lot of guys from Pennsylvania, as you know, Pennsylvania's the big wrestling state. A
Yep.
lot of guys wrestle. So a lot of guys I fish with have shoulder, elbow, wrist injuries. That's
Yeah.
a common kind of thing. So that's what I try to play to. Let's build a fly that has the illusion of bulk. It's got that illusion that it's huge and massive, but it's really light to cast. And
Yeah.
that's really important to me because I don't want to see those guys out there struggling after 3 hours going, man, this thing's heavy as shit, man. I can't
Yeah.
cast this.
That's right.
That's no fun for
You're on
anybody.
an intermediate or you're on a sink usually,
Yeah.
and then that's weight, and then you got this wet fly, and if it's made out of bunny fur, it weighs 10 times more, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a perfect topic. Let's talk about how you like to work different materials into a fly to reduce weight. So what are you looking to do? I'm sure sparseness has something to do with it. I'm sure
Right.
material types have something to do with it. Jump into that and walk through a few ideas.
So with that, I like to stay pretty traditional in my method. I like to stay with a lot of my mentors, Brad Bohan and Blaine Chocolate were two of my mentors when I first started off. Fur feather flash. Don't get overbulked in your profile. Stay light. That leads into Bob Popovic's method. Very little in the back end. And as you work forward, grow the density as you move forward. So in the back half of the fly, I will have fewer strands of bucktail, but I'll keep the butts of the bucktail to prop up that schlappen and prop up that flash so we're
Gotcha.
not getting tangled around the hook. As I move forward on the hook, now I'm starting to pick up the larger stacks of bucktail to, again, make that profile look a little bit bigger. And now as I continue forward and keep moving forward, now I'm generating a larger and larger bulk as I'm going forward.
Yeah, and I would assume bucktail is a favorite because of its
Yeah.
floatability and its lack of water absorption. Is that
Yes. Yep.
correct?
Yeah. Bucktail's one of my favorite materials. I like staying natural. I'm just a natural guy. I've tried some of the synthetics out there, and the synthetics are great. I use synthetics as some of my brushes for my heads.
Yeah.
They're really nice to help push water, break that meniscus of the water a little bit, help you
Hmm.
get down. But at the same time, I really like that natural material. It's nice to have some of that PA quality bucktail to just tie with.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm real big on marabou and schlappen. Like
Right.
I think the movement is just fantastic. One of the other ones I like is the rabbit fur, long hair rabbit fur. I think works really well for certain things, especially smaller flies in the streamer methodology. Um,
Absolutely.
Curious to hear from you about your ideas on flash when it comes to muskie. Some people go really high, some people go really low, and some people play all those genres. So, what are your perspectives on flash and how you like to utilize it?
Again, I like Flash. Early on, I was exposed to a couple of the gear guys, and some of the best gear guys throw those double cowgirls, and it's nothing but flash and two large blades up front.
Spinning,
And
yeah,
yep, and that's all flash. So I can't help but put flash in the fly.
yeah,
Now, whether it be a little bit of polar flash, but I like to start out with that mirage flash in the back, get a little bit of pearlescent going in the back half of my fly. Then I'll do some holographics intermixed.
mm-hmm.
And then once I get to the front half of the fly, then we'll start throwing in some crystal flash. And again,
Okay,
it's all about mixing that silhouette of the flash as we move forward in the fly, just to
yeah,
give, if that when that fish looks up, he's getting a different flash profile from the fly.
right.
If that kind of makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, I think silhouette's key, right? I mean, it's deadly in trout fishing, for
Yeah.
example. If you can match the silhouette, it doesn't matter the color; it's the silhouette and size, right?
Yep. Yep.
In predator fishing, size to me is more of a trigger. It's less of a expectation from a fish, meaning it can vary in sizes, but depending on the size, might be the trigger for that moment in their feeding mentality. But silhouette, I think, is a big one. Like they like certain things. You know, it's like, hey, I'm a steak eater, I'm a burger eater, I'm a vegetarian. You know, whatever it is. But the different bait fish might trigger those kind of things. When you talk about flash and your designs, are you working from the inside out on the fly with your flash, or is it a combination? I'm curious to how you like to utilize flash within your designs. It's, some people really like to have flash all on the outside. That's where I want my flash. I'm a little bit of like an in-betweener kind of guy. I don't like it all out on the outside because I think it just gets wrangly and out of control.
I do a little bit of both. I have a little bit of everything going on. Again, I use a little bit in the back half. Towards the front half, I use that ripple ice fiber, especially on some of the T-bones. I use it up underneath my Magnum dubbing and things like that, just to give a different light reflection. That way, when the sun is going down through, it's just refracting differently. It's picking up that different UV senses down through the water columns.
Mm-hmm.
So if that fish is sitting maybe 5, 6 foot down in some weeds, and that fly is moving up a foot and a half, 2 foot, and he might not want to move, certain light reflection, it might jar his attention, and he might
Mm-hmm.
want to come up through those weeds to grab that fly.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm always thinking, okay, different light refractions, different things like that, different UV senses might want to, again, different boxes.
Yep. Try to check them. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like how you're talking about the light refraction aspect of it because um you build these gaudy flies and it's like all this flash gold and super super bright and you're like Pennsylvania's a prime example, right? You got a lot of low light days. You
Hmm.
pull that fly out and you're like, man, this thing's so bright. And the reality is you need to think about like the penetration of light into the water.
Yeah.
If you're 2 feet deep, it's a different penetration than you are 6 feet deep. But it's unbelievable the amount of light that you'll actually get at 6, 8, and 10 feet, even in some murky water.
Yeah.
And then the other key element to that is that I think about a lot, and I don't know how to diagnose it or um, maybe utilize it as much, but I think about a lot of I like to have my fly when I'm fishing for predator fish to come in and out of light activated areas. So if I'm fishing a weed bed, I want to fish into an area where I might enter in a dark area, but I know I'm going to pull it across a unweeded area that's going to have a lot more light. And to me, that's like, okay, I'm stripping, I'm doing my jerk strip, and then all of a sudden it gets in that light zone. And I just think of that as like this beam of like, whoosh, what's going on? The fish is like, whoa, what was that? And then, oh, I'm gonna go after it. And curious to hear like how do you aim when you're casting and utilizing those things for different water types and how are you utilizing that?
I definitely try to set him up as much as possible to try and give him that ambush opportunity because they're ambush predators.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to feel it with their lateral line, but at the same time, if you can give them that opportunity, that's why I like the T-bone so much. That's why I tie it so much. It's because if you're bringing it through that weed bed on that pause, it's going to show profile. It's going to give them that full side view of the fly. And if you, like you're talking, if you bring it through a open part of the weeds and you give them that side profile,
Yeah,
it's going to give them everything they need. It's hard for something to say no to that.
that's where I was just getting ready to go. Is like you want to you want to give them those shots and pictures of like, man, that's hard to pass up, right?
Right,
Is the
exactly.
opportunity predation, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
it's that girl walking into a bar with a short skirt. It's like, all right. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, exactly.
it's
How
hard not to
not to
go
look
buy
with
her a
your
drink.
girlfriend
You
next to
know what I
you.
mean? Right. Exactly. Exactly.
I
So
love it. I love it. Nice, man. That's perfect. Well, very cool, man. You gave us a ton of tips, and I think that's a great place for us to make segue because I want to talk about this tying technique. I know you use Norvice. For those of you guys, I'm going to plug Norvice. I've met those guys at a couple shows. They are really good, down to earth people. That's what I loved about it. But the device itself is super. Um, it's very well designed. One, their new retractable threading bobbins are absolutely even better than they have always been. And the vise itself, the difference between a Norvise and other vices, there's probably more technical terms for this, but when you do your rotation on your Norvise, it's a single point rotation, meaning it doesn't come off axis when you rotate it. So tying things like buggers and all those still water flies that you can just put your material on and spin that thing up, man, it is like light years faster. And then when you're tying big flies and you're doing stuff like that, it's the same way. Like you could put a big hook in there and to build, and wrap things like hair and spin that and et cetera, and go down those roads of adding materials behind that or under it or over it. Man, it just gets so wild how fast that and accurate that vice is. It's super cool. Super cool.
yes, it is very cool. Very cool and very well made. Makes my life a lot easier.
Oh yeah, they're sturdy as all get out. And for big flies, the one thing that's really nice, I mean, it's great for small flies too, but your hook tension is
Yeah,
super high. I mean, you can
yeah.
like have
With a with our saltwater jaws and stuff, we could pretty much put a like an A dot beast fly hook in there and it essentially bend it out.
yeah, Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
crazy
So
what the strength is and the way that the body is built on it, so it secures really well, all those different things.
yes,
So I think just a very well thought out design. Okay,
yes.
that's enough of my dirty plug for those guys. I don't have one, but I've used one. Yeah, I will admit that I use cheap peak advice. I mean, I say cheap, but it's a great advice
It's
too.
it is.
It
Yep.
does everything I need to do. I'm not a commercial
Absolutely.
tire, etc.
Yep.
But I've used the Norvice, and it's hard to go back after you tied 25 woolly buggers on that thing. You're like, man, I never want to tie a woolly bugger on anything else again. So funny. You talked about thread tension and thread control. You know, I'm big on thread control, and my idea of thread control is always maintaining a very short distance of thread as I can. And a lot of that comes down to my bobbin and things like that. But I want to hear your perspective on it and why it's so important, and how you like to utilize those techniques.
Well, I've always heard that slack is bad. So whenever you get slack in your thread, there is room for error, and bad things can happen when you get slack in your thread. So good good thread control and maintaining good thread control immediately will allow you to have better flies. So one thing that the auto bobbin allows us to do is maintain good thread control and proper thread tension throughout the fly. So I think that really is a good tip for any fly tire to have, is maintaining good thread control throughout the fly tying
Yeah.
process. So whether you're palming your thread or whether you're using some type of auto bobbin that's out there on the market and using the clutch feature to wrap around
Yeah.
or to spin around, just maintaining that consistent pressure throughout the fly, not overworking your thread, is always good to maintain good control of your thread,
And
and will work out to a better fly.
you're nailing it too. And I want to just talk a little bit about bobbins, just show a couple here real quick. So this is your standard bobbin, right?
Yeah.
Thread control is usually controlled by you holding your bobbin like this. You're
Yep.
controlling it up front here with
Hmm.
your finger, but you can see how my hand's kind of palming and using the drag to control the drag tension. Now you have a certain level of tension you can set by bending these arms, etc., but it's really your palm that's controlling it for you.
Correct.
You mentioned some of the auto bobbin type things. This one's a little bit different, in that you have this wheel that tightens and really keeps tension here for you a little bit better. You don't have to use as much as your palm.
Right.
But the auto bobbin, I don't know if you have one handy with you. I don't have any, but
I should have grabbed one.
that's
I
okay. That's
have
all
mine
right.
out there. Yeah, I know. Also, Wright has the tension feature. Some of the Wright bobbins also
Yeah.
have some of the tension features on there. Just as another example, any of those, it just helps with that tension. And again, maintaining. Just find something that is working for you, so that when you go to have your next wrap, you're not struggling to pull, but at the same time, it's not freestyling on you. You're
That's
you're
right. Yeah.
free spinning on you.
All
You
right.
don't want anything that's coming out too smooth.
Right.
You want that, what I call that Goldilocks. You want
Yeah. Yeah.
that Goldilocks type of tension. It's somewhere in the middle,
And
and
it's different too. It's different for a 6/0 thread than it is for an 8/0 thread.
absolutely.
It's different in your. I've always felt like the weight of your bobbin, because I use a lot of friction
Hmm.
bobbins, but the weight of the
Yep.
bobbin really plays into that. And so I've done even things like, I don't have one here readily available, but I've taken a standard bobbin like this, and I've had where I've wrapped this with putty titanium, not titanium. What's the oh man, it's the putty lead basically for fishing, and I'll just put it
Okay.
on there because I want to add weight, because when I let it go, I want it to hold, like you said, schlapping, deer hair, et cetera. I need that weight for my tension.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of things that you can do, but you mentioned the importance of it. I really need people to understand, why is it so important to have the tension and control in the
Uh,
fly?
Well, if you don't, then your materials are just going to start to slide all over the hook. If you're trying to dub something and you don't have good thread control on it, your dubbing's not going to look right. If you're trying to tie in a wing, or especially if you're trying to tie in a bucktail or something, it's just going to want to spin around the hook. You're
Mm-hmm.
always going to have to try and wrangle up your thread. It's not going to look right.
Okay, so you mentioned that the importance of thread tension and tightness, but I really need people to understand why that's so important and what happens when you don't have those things. So, can you talk through that a little bit for me?
Right. So if you don't have proper thread control or thread tension, everything's going to become loose. And you're like your dubbing and your wings, especially your bucktail, it's just going to start sliding around the hook and things like that. And you're going to feel like, well, mine doesn't look like his and things like that. So that proper thread control, when you pull down and things like that, you're going to really want that to be proper thread tension and things like that. You're not going to want a free spool, and you're not going to want it too tight or anything like that. You're going to kind of want that, I don't know what I call that, Goldilocks type of thread control.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Again, nice and tight, nice and controlled thread tension as you're wrapping around the hook, or either spinning your hook when you're making
On
those
your,
wraps.
yeah. Yeah. And I think where I see myself make errors is when I don't have the right thread tension, I always end up in this position. And that's I'm holding my materials in place and I'm like cranking and like trying to make up. And it, do you find that too? Like, it seems like once you get behind, it's like very difficult to catch up.
Correct. What's eliminated that for me is the use of the auto bobbin. So that with that clutch and spring, everything is right there. So since I don't use that static bobbin anymore, everything
Mm-hmm.
is right there underneath the hook. But yes, you're correct. When I did, I was always having to catch back up, so to speak.
Yeah.
So um, that's why I say whenever you have the ability to either tighten or maybe even place one wrap around uh, one of those springs. So take a wrap
Yeah.
of thread around one of those springs, or palm it just a little tighter even. That way you're not trying to, as you say, catch up to
Right.
yourself, and wrap a little faster and then slow back down. Because then again, we're generating that slack that's in there
Yeah.
that we don't want.
In your control, my control or understanding of control has always been the length of thread outside my bobbin to the shank of the hook or whatever I'm wrapping. Is that how you kind of manage your control as well?
Uh, Correct, and also by the length of the thread and the tightness I feel. So
Okay.
when you pull down on something, I feel that tightness. So if I pull down and it's almost too much, I know I have too much tension.
Yeah.
Or if I go to
Okay.
pull down and you don't feel enough tension, there's slack somewhere in your wraps, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, and there's different techniques, right? You're like, I mean, a pinch wrap is an example of like
Yes,
that's a thread control technique. A double like deer hair. When I do spin deer hair, it's like I put three wraps that are relatively loose, and then I pull tight, and that spins the hair for me.
correct.
But I think understanding and knowing when and where to use those is really critical because where I was ending up in a lot of problems, and I'm assuming you've done this before, is if you don't have those base material wraps right, it doesn't matter what you wrap on top of that because that's always wanting to move around. It's just not tight enough. So, I mean, I've utilized glues and things like that to kind of help facilitate that, especially while learning. Do you still do some of those things? I mean, they add durability and et cetera as well, but curious to hear how you play there.
They do add durability, but I do not add as much glue anymore.
Hmm.
I I understand the thread control and everything. And if I'm spinning the hair, I spin the hair and make sure it's locked in, or I will manipulate the hair around the
Mm-hmm.
hook
Okay.
until I know that I have it secure. I want to feel that locking wrap actually lock that hair into place. Once
Mm-hmm.
I feel that hair lock into place, then I'll bring the thread forward up underneath and make those wraps and start my thread dam in front of that hair so
Gotcha.
that I know that it's locked securely in place. I know that I have that wrapped
Yeah.
secure.
Very mechanical in nature, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, Dominic, man, hey, man, it's been awesome having another PA guy on the show.
Thank
Once
you.
again, we're a fishy crew out there. I know that place is totally underlooked in all of its fishing. I laugh all the time because it's like Florida. You know, people just fly over it, going to other fishing places, and you're like, no, 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 you're missing out. You're missing out.
Yeah.
But great to have you on the show. Learned a ton today from you, not only on the Muskie and PA, but in general, and then the fly design stuff. So super cool to meet you in person finally and go through that. I look forward to hearing how things go for you the next year. Again, if you guys want to get a hold of Dominic, go to Streamer King Flies at Instagram, or streamer.kingflies.ecwid.com. And that's his website. You can pick up flies and things like that. And of course, anytime you want to contact, probably DM on Instagram is your best way to
Yeah.
go. And same
Yeah.
here, guys. If you have questions or want to get a hold of Dominic, don't be afraid to reach out to me. We'll see you next week. And I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you.